interest of time, we should start because I think many of you also would like to hear more about the next session also, ESG and e-commerce thing. But you know, today before we enter into the topic that we want to discuss, let me reintroduce actually my panelists. I mean my members of this panel. Start with Vovo from Indonesia, Kwe from Vietnam, Jane from Malaysia, Joshua from Singapore, and Kun Sarot from Thailand Bangkok office. And actually I have to say, Jane, you work very, very hard. You start like 3 panels in a row. I mean, like, so very, very good. Actually, at first she said, oh, so what, I don't have anything to say, much blah, 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 but you can see she's prepared a lot of informations. Okay, actually for, okay, and myself, Supawat, nice to be in this session. Actually, before we enter into or jump into the detail of discussion, I think we would like to at least discuss why today we have to discuss about this. How can business manage this multi-prong regulatory environment with different regulators? Actually, when I received this topic from Melissa, I also asked myself, okay, how I explain this to the audience, how to make people aware that these 2 topics relate to each other, you know, because it seems like it's come from a different perspective, different angle. So maybe let's start with Joshua first, because I told him before that, you know, for this panel discussion, you will be the main speaker, because Singapore is the most advanced in terms of data protections and also for competition related issues. So can you start telling us why it's important for today's discussion? I mean, like, why we have to discuss about this topic?
Yes. Okay. So I will start. Thanks, Supawat. I think the crux of my answer to this question is it's important because right now many regulators around the world, many countries around the world, many courts around the world are looking into this question. In particular in EU, in the US, in the other Western countries. And because there is that conversation taking place overseas in other countries, it necessarily spills over even into our region, into ASEAN, and regulators in the region, including Singapore, are paying attention to this. So I use one example to illustrate what I mean. For example, in EU, they had previously opened an investigation into Amazon. And what the EU was accusing Amazon of doing is that they think Amazon is unfairly or illegally taking data of all their merchants and their sellers, people who sell on the Amazon platform, and they're unfairly using that data to advantage Amazon's own products, because Amazon also manufactures its own small items, maybe cups, shirts, whatever. So what Amazon was accused of doing was they use all the data, they aggregate it, they see what sells the best, or how do you improve the product from the other third-party sellers, and from the information they gain from third-party sellers, they use it to advantage their own products. And so they don't have to spend so much money to do that trial and error, right? Once they know what works, they immediately sell into the market the thing that works. And so that was one of the issues that became a problem, because the Commission in the EU started to think, hang on, this is unfair competition. You are leveraging on your position as a platform. Because you're the platform, you have this specialized knowledge, you have this specialized data set, big data set, which nobody else has, and you're unfairly competing because you're using this data set for your own advantage. So that's what's happening in the EU. And the investigation was settled quite recently, but it's not so long time ago, it's just a couple of years back, right? Maybe 2-3 years back, it was started. And coming out from that, at least from the Singapore perspective, we see that that has influenced how Singapore is looking at big data and competition law, because Singapore now also amended its guidelines. So if you look at the amended guidelines now, there is a line which says something like, companies could breach competition law by using data that they have in some other platform to self-preference their own products. And that language looks like it's coming out of the Amazon case, for example, right? So what we're seeing here is, okay, something happens in the EU, but it's not just isolated in the EU. It does have impact to what regulators do in this region. And because of that, because it's being looked at in other parts of the world, it becomes important in our part too. So that, I think, illustrates why we need to be aware of the overlap between data protection and competition law.
So I think for today's session, it's also important to give the audience some idea about data protection law in each jurisdiction also, in order to give some basic understanding before we discuss a bit deeper. Kun Sarot, can you explain a bit about how data protection law, or in Thailand we call it PDPA? So can you explain a bit?
Okay. Yeah, I think as you most may be aware, that the Thai PDPA was just launched for a few years ago, and then full enforcement last year. I think it's still quite new from the regulator perspective. I think the PDPA, PCR still, working a lot to set out the guideline, subsidiary law, regulation, also the procedure for enforcing the PDPA in Thailand. Basically, the PDPA in Thailand is mostly adopt from the GDPR approach. The Thai PDPA is, basically the control the personal data based on the consent base with the some legal basis for you to, using the personal data. I think we still knew that the PDPC is still new on implement or enforcing the Thai PDPA. We can discuss further in relation to the competition in the next question.
Okay. Thank you, Kun Sarot. Well, you have anything to say about Indonesians?
Yeah, thank you, Supawat. So, first of all, I would like to answer the question about the why we need to discuss about the personal data protection. I think all of you know that the world now has changed, and I think most of them, the change may come from the development in technologies, from the globalization, and also from the pandemic that just happened recently. So one of notable change, I think at least in Indonesia, is that many institutions, either public institution or private institution, are now using the technology and to deliver their product or service to the society or to the consumers. So we now often hear about the electronic-based government, e-procurement, about the e-health, and also e-commerce. So the collection and utilization of personal data now more often and larger, I believe. While at the same time, at least in Indonesia, the protection of personal data is one of the human rights that need to be guaranteed by the government. So last year, Indonesia has adopted the law on personal data protection that it regulates about the right of the owner of the personal data, and then how the entities, the parties, they can collect, use, and also transfer the personal data, and then also the prohibition of illegal use of personal data, and also about the sanction. So through the adoption of this law, now all parties that collect and using the personal data, they have to be aware of this rule, so that they will not violate these rules, especially in Indonesia. So I think understanding of how Indonesian government regulate about the personal data have to be understood by everyone in Indonesia, especially businesses that are operating in Indonesia.
Okay, now your turn, Jen. Malaysia.
Thanks, Supawat. Yeah, so just to answer Supawat's question regarding why are we talking about this topic, right? And this topic is about, data protection law and also competition law. And it's basically about the intersection between data protection laws and also competition laws, right? So why are we talking about data, right? So why data? Because data is such a big thing these days, right? Well, let's just take a look at the evolution of data landscape these days. Never in our human history have we seen such information explosion, correct? And this is attributed by, the use of all these smartphones, computers, or even your connected cars, or even your GPS, or your Waze and everything. So all of these devices collect data, right? So basically, right, whatever we touch, basically much of whatever we touch these days generates data. And what is the outcome of this digital revolution, right? Because of all these, the laptops, cars, GPS, everything, right? What is the outcome of all this digital revolution? Data is collected and data is processed, right? So when a large amount of data, of high velocity is actually collected and processed to produce, a very unique set of data of commercial value, right? This is what we call the concept of big data, right? Because data, a large amount of data of high velocity, they are collected and then they become, a product of commercial value. They become an input, So that is why we are talking about this today, right? And what is the conflict, the intersection between data protection law and competition law? And that's precisely the topic today, right? Data protection laws, as we all know, data protection law is data protection law is to regulate how personal information is processed, right? To ensure that the interests and also the rights of individuals are safeguarded. So data protection laws, they are there to ensure that all this personal information of ours as individuals, they are not leaked, they are not shared, without our consent. They are not shared with third parties without our consent, right? So that's the purpose of data protection laws. Okay, but then what's competition law? Competition law is to ensure there's healthy competition in the market, right? And when there's healthy competition in the market, consumers are benefited. Why? Because consumers get better, lower prices, lower price goods, or even goods with better quality. So the consumers are benefited. So you see, when you look at it, it looks like data protection law and this competition laws, they actually complement each other because ultimately they are protecting the consumer's welfare, right? The consumer's right to their personal information and the consumer's right to better products, better price products, healthy competition in the market. But then when you look at it at the other side of it, because data protection law, they prohibit all this personal information of these individuals to be shared without their consent. But the flip side of it is, from the competition law perspective, you want this data to be shared, right? Okay, because you want this personal data, okay, because why? Like, when there's a restriction imposed on this big data of commercial value, to be shared among enterprises which need this data, to run their businesses, then competition will be hampered. Competition in the relevant market will be hampered. So let me just give you an example of, a restriction on how data portability. So this was actually looked at in US and also in the EU, where what Google did, okay, in US and also in the EU was that Google actually restricted its advertisers who use its advertising platform. So Google's advertising platform, yeah. So Google restricted its advertisers who use its advertising platform from transferring data from its advertising platform to a competing advertising platform, for example, a Microsoft advertising platform, using a third-party software service provider, right? So when Google imposed such restriction, what happened? The advertisers, they are locked in to only Google's advertising platform. They cannot switch from Google's advertising platform to Microsoft's advertising platform. They can't use Microsoft advertising platform because Google said, yeah, you can go and use Microsoft advertising platform, but you are not allowed to transfer your data, your campaign data, your pricing information data, those data which you have collected or use, when you're using my advertising platform. You cannot transfer this data from my platform to Microsoft's platform. So competition in the market of that advertising platform is hampered, is affected, because advertisers now, they can only, they're locked into to Google, because if they want to go to Microsoft, they have to recollect all this data, right? So, but data is not supposed, under data protection laws, data is not supposed to be just transferred like that without consent from the individuals. That's the purpose of data protection laws. That's to protect the individual's personal information. So that is why we are having this discussion today. It's about the conflict between data protection laws and also competition laws. Yeah. So
thank you, James. Actually, I know I'm supposed to go to your, you are the next one, right? But when we talk about conflict, James mentioned about conflicting between these two laws. I just want to ask Joshua whether you have any thing to share about the conflict between these two regulations. For example, when we talk about big data or data privacy, we talk about something like sometimes data sharing, data profiling. And when we talk about data sharing, it seems okay. I mean, if you pass certain requirement under data privacy law, but I think it's always controversial in the antitrust. I mean, competition law. Can you share something like this? I mean, whether that we have any conflicting issue between these two areas?
Thanks, Supawat. I think that's a very good point. I want to pick up on what Jane said, because really what Jane was describing is already one example of data protection sometimes conflicting with competition law, right? Data protection requires you to get consent before you can share data. On the other hand, that might actually restrict competition. So that comes out in the Google case. There's another additional aspect that this conflict also arises from, and the aspect is this. Under data protection laws, there is this requirement in the EU, and now they're looking to introduce it also in Singapore. There's a requirement for data portability. In other words, what the law in the EU says is that consumers will have the right to request your data that is with one company to be ported wholesale to another company. So that's called data portability, and that's helpful because, for example, in the context of Thailand, it doesn't have, I don't think Thailand has data portability yet. But for example, if your personal data is with True, right, a telecommunication company, and you want to change operator, you want to change handphone providers, you can, if there's a data portability requirement, then you can just ask True to pass all your data to maybe DTAC, and then you can very easily change your mobile line to DTAC without having to reapply for a new mobile line, whatever. So that really is the data portability requirement that has come up in the EU, and Singapore is also in the midst of introducing. So I say this by way of background. And the reason why I'm explaining this is because even the data portability requirement can give rise to competition law issues. And this has been studied by the Singapore regulator, and it's raised a question mark. Because, and the problem is this, right? If companies are allowed to pass their data to other companies, then it allows companies in general to profile each of you as a consumer. And then it gives rise to price discrimination issues, because the companies will be better able to know what your profile is as a consumer, how much you earn, what you prefer, etc. and then they might give you a very specific price that might be higher for you and lower for somebody else. They might price discriminate based on the data, the additional data that they're getting. So in other words, what Jane was explaining is that having not enough data could limit competition, but having too much data also could limit competition in another way, because it could lead to price discrimination issues in the context of a company that's very big, an abuse of dominance. So the takeaway from this is, it's not a very simple topic. When you're talking about data, right, it could come out in many different ways. The competition law implications could come out in many different ways, and sometimes it's not very obvious what the right answer is. When you are doing something to comply with data protection laws, it's not obvious that necessarily you also comply with competition law. And so you need to do that assessment and that study to make sure that you are compliant with both.
Thank you, Joshua. I think it's very, like Joshua said, this topic is very complicated. So sometimes it's very hard to make a right call to manage these two together. So, Kwe, do you have anything to share from Vietnam's?
Thanks, Superwat. For Vietnam, I think earlier we do have quite a number of regulations for data security. So I have to say what is the difference between data security and data privacy. So data privacy, actually we're talking about how we collect the personal data, how we use it, how we manage it, and how we store it, including the transfer of the data privacy, the data information. But data security is how to prevent the data can be accessed or can be used by unauthorized party. So before, Vietnam has quite a number of different regulations on the data security, but latest one, we have the new decree just focused on the data privacy, which is very strictly requirement how you can get the data information, personal data, we're talking about personal data, how we can manage it, how we can storage it, how we can cross-border transfer it. So in Vietnam, actually currently until now that we have these two separate sets of regulations for data security and data privacy. So back to the question is how the competition regulations and the personal data protections is regulated. So from the Vietnam regulations, we might see that if one enterprises, they have data, I mean that they have either AI or they have a very high tech of technology to collect the data, so it can bring the issues that there might be a cartels, which makes the authority feel confusing and very difficult to conclude the acts. For example, like previously when we're saying that, oh, these few companies or the group of companies, they're sitting together, they're meeting, they're talking, now they don't use people, they use AI. So how can you define that we actually doing something like unfair competition or we have anti-competition activities? It makes the authority becomes more challenging on how to conclude this, because they don't use actually like the routine or the habit that we have to do before, where they use AI. So, and through AI, many things that we can be unseen, right? So that is from abusement perspective. So dominance abusement is also something that under the Vietnamese law, we're talking about either market share of more than 30% for one individual party, or we're talking about significant market power that this morning I mentioned. So significant market power is including the company which has the technology or which has the very good infrastructure on technology or high tech. So let's take an example for Facebook. Whenever you go to Facebook, you just click on one picture and immediately so many things relating to that pictures will come. So they already knows your habits, your likes or your dislike. And if one company, they knows that how many people like this, they will take advantages of that statistic numbers to enhance their promoting trading activities, marketing activities. So I mean that kind of thing is also relating dominant abusement. They use their own technology, I mean that AI or whatever high tech that we're talking, to do abusement in their own business. And also the other thing is unfair competition practice. unfair competition practice in Vietnam, we're also talking about the unfair assessment of getting other competitors' know-how or technologies. So now with the technology, they're easier for them to get it. You can ignore that. Whatever you do, they might have the way to know, right? With AI, with high tech. So, and including the data privacy about the key managers or the key leaders or whatever, they also can get. So that things that we see how is closely the two relations between competitions and also the data privacy and data security can be linked together. And that's just sharing my 3 points relating to Vietnam jurisdiction.
Actually, I just want to ask you a little bit more. When the situation, with this kind of situation, for example, since Vietnam already have data protection and also competition law in place already, can I say, I mean, from like, if I was, if I were, I mean, e-commerce business, and I said, okay, I collect data, I share data, I do the profiling according to Vietnamese law already. Do I have to care about competition law in Vietnam, or I just, you know, if I pass the test, it's okay?
Very interesting questions, because actually for e-commerce, this is also one of the sensitive sectors that most of the e-commerce players in the market right now, they do have advantages comparing to other trading, normal trading platform. The reason why I'm saying so, because all of the e-commerce, you always have the collection of the data, because you are the buyer. I should know where you stay, where should I deliver the products, what is your phone number. So all of these kinds of personal data, the e-commerce trader, they will have. But whether it imposed to the competition risk is whether they use personal data of their own customers to take advantage and then to restrict the competition in the market. For example, like if they use the statistic of the personal data and they know that, oh, this person staying in this area, normally in this area, how many people will order this kind of products, and then they promoted these products into this area and they just limited some certain sellings or something like that, limited the competition in that area, and that might be causing some certain risks for the authorities to conclude that are you trying to take advantages of your own personal data information in order to causing unfair practice.
Joshua, you have anything to add to Quay? I mean, like about these two issues? I mean, like.
So, I mean, you're absolutely right, especially for e-commerce platforms, right? There is this big issue about whether or not e-commerce platforms have too much data. Again, in some jurisdictions, we are seeing this idea that the collection of data allows you to enhance your market power, allows you to abuse your dominance more, because you have all this data, nobody else has the data that you have, and therefore you have an unfair advantage. So increasingly, even in the Singapore guidelines, we have seen that the regulator has said, if you have data dominance, if you have a lot of data, that could be one factor for the regulator to consider that you have market dominance in the market, and then you could potentially be subject to various abuse of dominance conduct issues. And also, there's this big argument now about whether or not we should force companies with data dominance to share their data. There is no answer to that yet. Nobody has come out to say, Amazon or I don't know, some other company, you have to share your data right now. We're not there yet, but that discussion is ongoing, whether e-commerce platforms or tech platforms in general have too much data, that it's too big and disadvantaging others.
Okay, so, and I think it's related to what you just mentioned. It seems to me that it's not, I mean, you feel that, I mean, okay, this is my question. Do you think in Singapore, for example, do you have enough legal framework to make this to go along with each other in a right manner? Do you feel that you have that kind in place already?
So as I mentioned before, we've changed the guidelines. This is quite recent, 2021, right? So we do have studies. We have not market studies, but market papers, and analysis papers that were done a couple of years back, and they changed the guidelines in 2021. But the problem, I think, for Singapore is that we don't have an enforcement case yet. So we have all these guidelines, but we don't know practically how it's going to play out. And also, because there's no enforcement, I guess maybe people are not so worried yet about it. So my sense is the day we see an enforcement case in the region, in whether in Singapore, Indonesia, etc., the day we see an enforcement case on data, then rules will develop quite quickly, and companies will pay perhaps more attention to it.
Thank you, Joshua. I think I would like to talk about Thailand, but I think many of you already know that we have PDPA and also competition law in place. But I don't feel that these two laws, or even regulator, they work with each other to make these two areas become like smooth, like in the business sense. Kun Saroครับ, in the context that we still don't have the regulators or regulation that make these two laws go together, can you suggest to the audience, our audience, that how a business sector should survive in this kind of atmosphere?
Yeah, I think as our guest speaker from the TCCT mentioned this morning, that the Thai competition law is actually enact in a traditional way. They're looking at general trade, not yet looking into the digital economy or the big data concern. I think we can see that the TCCT itself is now working very hard together with the other competition regulator in ASEAN or Singapore or other country, in EU or US, to came out or to consider to amend the law. So I think our guideline, for example, the definition of the market dominance, which currently looking only on the number of turnover or revenue. So I think to suggest to the business, I think you need to monitor the development from the for example from the TCC itself, whether they because when they issue guideline or they want to amend the law, most of the time they asking for the public hearing. So I think you have to monitor if you can attend the public hearing or the seminar from the TCC, or even the law firm like us. I think we would suggest that you to contribute time to attend, and also I think, and then if you have any unsure thing that between the BTPA or the anti-competition law, Thai anti-competition law, which is quite new. I think an official discussion, consultation with the regulator may be the option for you as well.
Okay, thank you, Khun Sarot. Jen, do you have anything to add from Malaysia?
Well, so basically in Malaysia, we don't have any guidelines or any guidance relating to this, how the MyCC would actually deal with, these competition law issues in relation to all this data concentration and big data. So, we are not as advanced as Singapore yet. We don't have any guidelines, guidance, or anything of such. So as to how I think the private entities should actually, prepare themselves for this in the event they've actually face a situation whereby there's such a conflict between both laws, right? I think private entities, businesses should really just, keep yourself abreast of, all the developments in these both areas of law, and also, most importantly, the ensure compliance with both laws to the extent possible. And also, as what Saroj mentioned earlier, right? Have consultation with your regulators. So it's maybe if you are someone, your business is proficient in dealing with all this big data, a large volume of data, right, or on a daily basis, or you deal with a lot of all this data, if that is your business, then I think you should, try to be more, actively engage yourself with the regulators, so that you can actually shape their understanding of the relevant issues in this area. Because if you constantly engage with them, right, then you can tell them, and you let them know what are the issues in this area, like the self-preferencing issues which Joshua mentioned, the data portability issue which I mentioned, all these algorithm or collusion algorithm collusion issues. So when the regulators, they are aware of such issues, then in the future, when they come up with guidelines or guidance, relating to this area, they will take into consideration, all these issues which you have been feeding them, right? Then, by then, when the guidelines is issued, then, your issues will be dealt with in those guidelines. Yeah. So I think that's one way forward, if you want to make sure that the regulatory framework in your country is actually shaped, according to, the practices in the other jurisdictions, especially like in Malaysia, we don't have any guidelines or guidance in this respect. Yeah.
Okay. My next question to you, Wo. I know that Indonesian is quite new to this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But do you have anything to share? I mean, or foresee that is going to happen in Indonesia?
Okay. As I mentioned, so personal data protection law in Indonesia is just recently issued last year, and this law actually require a lot of implementing regulations to provide technical guidance on how the rules in this law will be implemented. So we will see how the government will specify and regulate about the personal data protection. Also, there will be a new institution that will be responsible for the implementation and supervision of the enforcement of the law on personal data protection. And for the competition law, I think the authority in Indonesia, they also know that there is a interplay between personal data protection and competition law. But I think also in other jurisdictions, Indonesia do not have guidance right now at the moment. So I think the companies that now already collecting a lot of personal data from the consumers need to really carefully assess how the companies will use and then collect or transfer the data, so it will not violate the competition law as well as the personal data protection.
Thank you, Joshua. I think this is going to be our last question. I think I just want you to share. I mean, like to leave something to the audience. I mean, about this regulation and how. I mean, yeah, we should focus later on.
So, I mean, if I were to do some crystal ball gazing into the future about data, what's coming up, like hot off the press issues that are coming up now is basically artificial intelligence. So in the US, for example, the FTC, Lina Khan has already came out to say that we are looking into AI. In particular, the problem with AI now is that only very few companies have the capability to run strong AI. So we have, say, Google, Microsoft, Meta's Llama. These are a couple more are coming up in China, but you only have a handful, right? And so when AI comes on, what does it mean? It means that it's going to entrench the data dominance of the existing companies. Like companies like Google already have so much data, and if you roll out more AI models, people feed it more data. When you use their tools, you are feeding it a lot of data already. So one big concern is that AI is going to lead to an entrenchment of the incumbents and strengthen their data dominance. That's one part of it. The other part is, as Quay mentioned, AI can also have the tendency to hypercharge this idea of collusion between competitors. For example, because even right now we know that companies are using price monitoring algorithms to see how other competitors price and they price accordingly, etc., right? And so this in itself is already a big question mark depending on how you do it, it could infringe competition law, it could. And so one of the concerns that's coming up now going forward is with AI superimposed on top of it, this collusion between using algorithms might get even more problematic. So that is another big piece that competition regulators are looking at. So maybe next year we'll be looking at not just data and competition, it'll be like AI regulation and competition. But I think this is something that's coming on the horizon.
Yeah, I agree that next year or next event, we probably may have much more to say about this. But I think for our session today, I think that we come to an end. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, panelists.